Tool-specific project-based learning. Introduction. What is tool-specific project-based learning? Why is it important to focus on specific tools for a class? And is this really project-based learning if the tool is dictated by the teacher? These are common questions when it comes to this type of project-based learning. For purists of PBL, they will view this type of project-based learning as not project-based learning at all. And that's okay. Opinions are important. We have to listen to all sides to form our own conclusion. I see that tool-specific project-based learning is important in the spectrum of doing PBL because it's another step towards pure 100% great project-based learning. And many of us use this type of PBL without even realizing it. Key concepts from the reading. Sometimes tools need to be learned for class projects to help students understand the content more efficiently. For example, graphing calculators, Bunsen burners, glue guns, 3D printers. Those are just a few tools that a classroom might use that students need to learn as a part of different assignments. What is the value of adding technology to project-based learning? The Blumenfeld article says that it's about 3 specific things. The first is access. By allowing access to more tools, it supports more creative choices by students. So when students have access to a variety of tools, they can engage in a problem-solving process that allows them to look at different tools that can be used to solve the problem. When you're limiting the amount of tools, you're limiting the possible types of projects that can be created. The second one is interest. By adding technology to lessons, it increases student interest. The research is very clear on this. By just having technology, students are more inclined to be engaged. Now, you should never add a tool just because it adds bells and whistles. Now, if you're adding a piece of technology because it supports instruction and it supports learning, and it happens to have bells and whistles, that's okay. But it shouldn't be the only reason you add a piece of technology. And the last one is active representation. Students have the power to create and share their knowledge more easily. The easier it is to share what they know and what they've learned, the more likely it is for students to engage. Technology is a great tool that allows people to share what they know easily. We want our students to be engaged, and we want to remove any barriers that prevent them from doing so. Case study. A perfect example of using tool-specific project-based learning is one that I did with 6th grade English language arts students. Working with the 6th grade ELA teacher, we implemented the use of Python text coding. We did this so students can create a text-based choose-your-own-adventure game. We wanted kids to experience coding because we knew it would emphasize the importance of proofreading. A lot of grammatical rules apply in Python, and those rules are important for students to understand. And to create a game and to experience what those rules look like when broken is a great way to engage in a learning activity. Students created different dungeons and rooms and stories and focused on descriptive writing, and they did all of this following the template provided by Raspberry Pi. The games students created were intense, and they were varied, and that's what made it so special, is that students poured who they were into these games. By having coding as a part of this ELA class, students that were reluctant to read and reluctant to write and definitely reluctant to proofread were diving in 100% to their stories and their games. And that's huge. How the key concepts apply. The web-based program allowed all students access to text-based coding that allowed them to create a computer game. By adding the technology, every student had access, and that's what you want to create when you add pieces of technology. Equity. Each student was able to personalize their game based on their interest. This allowed them a sense of ownership that increased their engagement. The example that I created had around 40 rooms. While some students went above and beyond the 10-room minimum and had rooms of 50, 60, and 70. Many students continued to work on this long after the assignment was done. Through using this tool, students were able to focus on core concepts in the ELA class: proofreading, sentence structure, descriptive writing, plot outlining, and peer editing. When you can normally struggle getting students to proofread and focus on these parts of speech and grammar, using a specific tool, in our case Python, allowed for students to engage in a project more fully and more completely and develop a better understanding of those concepts. Summary. Introducing a tool to support student learning is important, but it has to be more than just something new and shiny. It needs to be purposefully introduced to engage students in learning. By coding a game, students were immersed in a complex writing task so they could best use the tool to create the game. We need students to go from being reluctant to being engaged. And sometimes teachers know the perfect tool to do that. That's why tool-specific project-based learning is an important part of the PBL spectrum. Key question. Can a tool become too much of the focus on the project and the content gets lost in the shuffle? How do you avoid that from happening? Tool-specific projects fit with computer science very well. What value is there in having students learn a specific computer science tool, coding, language, hardware, etc., through a tool-specific project?